Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. Our topic for tonight is escalating risks are grounds for firing. But before we get to the escalating risks, I do want to say a few words about the Trump conviction. First, I'm going to share Facebook, however. If you'll give me a moment, it's a little slow coming in. So there we are. This piece appeared in Common Dreams. Here's a photo. Someone holding a sign saying, Trump convicted. In his criminal trial outside a Manhattan criminal court in New York City on May 30th. Quote, historic win for accountability, unquote. New York jury finds Trump guilty on 34 felony grounds. Quote, now it's up to the American people to protect our democracy by holding Trump accountable at the ballot box and ensuring that a convicted fraudster never sets foot in the Oval Office again, unquote, said one democracy defender. This piece was written by Brett Wilkins, who says this is a developing story. Please check back for possible updates. A New York jury on Thursday found former U.S. President Donald Trump guilty of all 34 felony charges related to the falsification of business records regarding hush money payments to cover up sex scandals during the 2016 presidential election. The verdict, which came on the second day of jury deliberations, marked the first time in U.S. history that a former president has been convicted of felony crimes. The presumptive 2024 Republican nominee faces 54 other federal and state felony charges across 3 more cases. Quote, I never thought I'd see the day, unquote, journalist Mehdi Hassan said on social media following the verdict's announcement. Quote, Teflon Trump finally found guilty of crimes. Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, or CREW, President Noah Bookbinder said after the verdict, the conviction of a former leader is a sad day for the country, but today's conviction is also a historic win for accountability and affirms that Donald Trump indeed broke the law by falsifying records in order to hide information from the American people ahead of the 2016 election. After reviewing an enormous amount of overwhelming evidence, the jury unanimously concluded that Trump engaged in criminal activity that demands accountability, all the more so because it may be only the first piece of what appears to have been a presidential crime spree. Speaking after his conviction, Trump said, quote, "This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt," unquote. Quote, "I'm a very innocent man," added Trump, who was scheduled to be sentenced on July 11th, just days before the Republican convention. He could face up to 4 years behind bars. But unfortunately, he won't start before the election. Had to emphasize that. Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen, paid porn star Stormy Daniels $130,000, while the owner of the National Enquirer tabloid paid former Playboy model Karen McDougal $150,000. Both women say they had sexual relations with Trump. President Joe Biden's re-election campaign issued a statement following Trump's conviction. In New York today, we saw that no one is above the law. Donald Trump has always mistakenly believed he would never face consequences for breaking the law for his own personal gain. But today's verdict doesn't change the fact that the American people face a simple reality. There is only one way to keep Donald Trump out of the Oval Office, at the ballot box. Convicted felon or not, Trump will be the Republican nominee for president. Public Citizen Executive Vice President Lisa Gilbert said that, quote, "This is an historic moment for democracy," unquote. Quote again, "A jury heard evidence that Donald Trump illegally interfered in the 2016 election and rendered a fair and appropriate verdict," unquote, she continued. Quote again, "New York prosecutors served justice by bringing this case. We applaud the jury for doing its job, standing up for the fundamental principle that no one is above the law, not even a former president," unquote. Justice, quote again, "Justice was served today," Gilbert added, and quote, "Yet again, on to the next trial," unquote. Susan Lerner, executive director of Common Cause New York, asserted that, quote, "This case was always about hiding key information from voters. Now a jury of the former president's peers have confirmed that he lied to the public by falsifying business records in order to influence the outcome of the 2016 election. This is a felony punishable with jail time or probation, just like anyone else convicted of the same crime. We expect him to be sentenced accordingly," Lerner added. "We thank the jury, whom Mr. Trump and his lawyers helped to select, for doing their civic duty. Trust that the public will accept their decision, as well as their right to privacy. Respect for the rule of law is the foundation of our democracy, but so is public trust in the process." Sean Eldridge, founder and president of Stand Up America, said in a statement that, quote, "Today's verdict reaffirms that no one is above the law in the United States of America, including a former president," unquote. Quote again, "Falsification of business records is a serious crime, and Trump is finally being held accountable like any other American would," unquote. He continued, "This verdict is not just about hush money payments. It's about an illegal attempt to hide the truth from voters just days before the 2016 election, and it's part of Trump's clear pattern of doing anything, including breaking the law, in order to cling to power." Quote, "Despite this monumental verdict, One trial isn't going to keep Trump out of the White House. Sean Eldridge added, quote again, the jurors have done their duty, and now it's up to the American people to protect our democracy by holding Trump accountable at the ballot box and ensuring that a convicted fraudster never steps foot in the Oval Office again, unquote. So that's the news. People have all kinds of opinions about this. Uh, there are first those who think this decision was a bad decision because it's only going to help the fundraising of Donald Trump and it's only going to make him more sympathetic to his supporters and it's only going to create more votes for him when the time comes to vote. And in the immediate future, it will raise his polling status um, as well. Uh, so there are those who say we shouldn't have had, this verdict. They're not saying Trump was not guilty. Some of them may be saying that this whole thing was rigged because there were certain things that were not admitted into the trial that were important for creating a full picture of what Trump did and why he did it. There are others who insist that we shouldn't be practicing lawfare in this country, that we should just let things be decided at the ballot box. But I have to reject that last comment. I just want to make a very brief comment about that. And that is, there is not much doubt that Trump engaged in criminal activity here. The question has always been, whether his motive was to hide the information from his wife and safeguard his marriage, or hide the information from the public to project his chances of winning the election in 2016. I personally believe, and I think history bears me out, he doesn't really care a damn about his wife. He wasn't trying to protect her. It seems to me he was trying to maximize his chances for the presidency. It's pretty plain to me that was his motive. But even if it were not his motive, what it comes down to is he has been found guilty of a crime. He broke the law here. It was a felony conviction. You can talk all you want to about how others in a similar situation might not have been convicted. You can talk all you want to about the rigging of a trial, that certain things were excluded. But it seems there was a lot of plain evidence that he did what the prosecution said he did. So once again, I think the question here comes down to motive. And I think that the finding that he likely committed to pay off Stormy Daniels because he didn't want this scandal to be a factor shortly before the election and block his chances for the White House. That's a very credible thing for me. I don't really care whether the conviction improves his chances for the presidency does not improve his chances for the presidency. From my point of view, the issue is whether he was guilty or not guilty. I believe he was probably guilty. And I think, therefore, it was the duty of the prosecution and the duty of the jury to convict him and let the chips fall where they may, whatever the political impact of such a conviction might be. So that's my take, on that event. I do wish, though, that in running the campaign, that people do not rely too much on the conviction of Donald Trump, that they fight the campaign, on other issues, that they talk about what the likely Trump foreign policy would be, that they talk about what his likely domestic policies would be, that they talk about what his attack on democracy is likely to be like. I think those are the considerations that we ought to use in judging his campaign for re-election to the office of President of the United States. If those criteria are used, it seems to me that Trump is clearly an unacceptable choice, because he may be easier in terms of the Ukraine situation. He seems to have indicated that he would end that war very quickly. That's probably a good thing. But based on his record and his pronouncements, we cannot say the same about the war in Israel. We cannot think that he's going to de-escalate tensions with China. Both of those things are very, very unlikely. I think to elect Trump to the presidency again would be to create a horrible risk for the end of our chances for democracy for some time, to come. Now, somebody's going to raise the question of Joe Biden. I freely admit that Joe Biden is as much a threat to democracy as Donald Trump. He may not only be as much of a threat to democracy, he may be more of a threat to our very lives. And there's no democracy if there's no life. So, I'm glad he got convicted. I think it was a matter of duty to prosecute him, and a matter of duty to bring him to account before the law, and to convict him if he was guilty, as the evidence seems to suggest. So I'm glad that happened. It may give Trump some momentary advantages in running for the presidency, but I suspect when the issues begin to hit home to people, they will also agree that Trump can never be president again. And also, I hope that they will agree that Joe Biden will never be president again, or should never be president again. I think we have to turn to others. But to underline that possibility, I must go to my second piece of the night. Let me bring that up. There's Robert Copeland, John B., Andy Candy, D is here, I guess. Hi, D. Shane says Modern Money Authority came out at 3 p.m. today, and we launch in a few hours. Shane says, thanks for the help, Joe. Says hello. Trump is a criminal, as is Biden, and every single president for a long time. Different types of criminals, but definitely all criminals. I kind of agree with Shane about that. Shane says Modern Money Authority came out at 3 p.m. today, and we launch in a few hours. That puzzles me a little bit because I thought that Modern Money Authority would come out when we launch. So it puzzles me that we came out before we launched. I'm not sure what that means, but I'm sure you're going to explain it to me. So Dolores Pierce is here. Hello, Dolores, and she shared. That was very good. Andy Candy says, hello, Joepedia. I finally caught up with you. It's been a hell of a week. Thank you. Thank you, April. It's been a hell of a week. Dee said, hello, everyone. And Andy said, or April said, I did share, like, and comment late night. Always excellent coverage. I enjoyed your commentary, especially along with Pepe and Scott. Yeah, they're great, aren't they? And April said, hi, Queen D and guests. April said, Donald Trump, the giant doo-doo clump. God. Jesus. That rhymes, April. John B. says, Trump's donors are investing in his re-election for the very reason that he is corrupt. Thus will serve their needs to achieve yet greater government booty. Trump will forgive himself when re-elected. Yes, I suspect he will try to pardon himself and make that stick. Though President Biden or Donald Trump should not be elected as president of the November elections. I've been hearing we have to vote for President Biden. If you vote third party, you're voting for Donald Trump. I know, we've always heard that every year. We always hear that. Understanding MMT, we already got over 100 views. Oh, I guess you're saying the website came out at 3 p.m. and we've launched. And Shane says we used it as teaser comment. Understanding MMT is also Shane Coughlin. He's tweeting from that account as well. And April says, yep, they're criminals. Low-key has it right when he described how it's Anglo-gangsterism across the world. That was an apt description of it, I think. So let's get to the next of our posts for tonight. And here we get to the reason why Joe Biden can never be president again. Because Joe Biden has placed all our lives under risk. This is a continuation of last night's account. Biden reportedly gives Ukraine okay to strike Russia with U.S. weapons. Not just to strike Russia in Ukraine, but to strike Russia in Russia. One high-ranking Vatican official warned that the new policy, quote, could lead to an escalation that no one will be able to control, unquote. That was what Pepe Escobar contended last night. That was what Scott Ritter contended when we played one of his videos, or part of one of his videos on our show last night. Not just could lead to an escalation no one will be able to control, because that speaks to possibility. What we're talking about here now is likelihood, not just possibility. This article is by Brett Wilkins, came out on May 30th, 2024, which was yesterday. U.S. President Joe Biden has partially lifted his administration's ban on Ukrainian use of U.S. supplied weapons to strike targets inside Russia. According to Thursday reporting, policy critics have called a provocative escalation of the 27-month war, citing, quote, people familiar with the move, unquote. Politico reported that Biden has quietly given Kyiv the green light to carry out limited cross-border strikes near Kharkiv as Russian forces menace Ukraine's second largest city. Quote, the president recently directed his campaign to ensure that Ukraine is able to use U.S. weapons for counter-fire purposes in Kharkiv, so Ukraine can hit back at Russian forces hitting them or preparing to hit them, unquote. Does that mean preparing to hit them from Moscow? I mean, where is the limit of this, Joe Biden? Now, of course, the assumption might be, well, what he's talking about is Russian forces who are very close to Ukraine and are preparing to come in. But that's not how, it's worded. Because Russian troops can be preparing to hit the Ukrainians from anywhere in Russia. The official said that Biden's prohibition on long-range attacks inside Russia, quote, has not changed, unquote. They gave a similar statement to The Hill. Russian President Vladimir Putin, who ordered the invasion of his neighbor in February 2022, warned Tuesday that any attacks by Ukrainian forces on Russia using Western-supplied weapons, quote, can lead to serious consequences. And Putin said that very seriously. Biden's reversal came amid divided opinion in his administration over whether to allow Ukraine to use U.S. arms to attack Russia. Secretary of State Antony Blinken favored the more aggressive policy, which is supported by major NATO allies, including Germany, France, the United Kingdom, and Canada. Anti-war voices sounded the alarm over Biden's shift, with Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin saying, quote, I think this possibility should concern everyone who cares about the fate of our world. I think he should have said, I think this likelihood should concern everyone who cares about the fate of our world. Quote, it could lead to an escalation no one will be able to control, he added. Defense Priorities, a Washington, D.C.-based foreign policy think tank, said on social media that, quote, the number one priority for U.S.-Ukraine policy should be avoiding escalation to direct U.S. conflict with a nuclear-armed Russia. Now, I have to say here, this is not just a nuclear-armed Russia. This is a nuclear-armed Russia with 6,000 warheads, many, many warheads than we reportedly have. It is a nuclear-armed Russia with hypersonic intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of reaching the United States. Those warheads could go on those missiles. Is Ukraine worth it to the United States to risk the Russians blowing up Boston or New York or Philadelphia or even any minor American city. What are we doing when we look at what the Russians are saying? All they're saying is, if you hit us in Russia with US made weapons being operated by US staff using intelligence provided from US satellites coming to US staff on the ground inside of Ukraine, if you engage in a situation where these staff on the ground inside of Ukraine are doing everything to fire various kinds of missiles into Russia at strategic and civilian targets, and you're doing everything except actually pushing the button, we, Russia, will still consider you to be at war with the will consider the United States to be at war with Russia if U.S. personnel are doing this. Moreover, we will consider any such activities by NATO personnel to be war with Russia by NATO forces, and we will respond in kind. We cannot allow NATO forces sitting inside of Ukraine to do everything they can except push the button to attack Russia. No, if you are in Ukraine as belligerent forces facilitating the Ukrainians to push the button, then you are combatants. And we have the right and will respond to deter your warlike activities against the Russian Federation. We will feel free to attack the origins of the troops. We will feel free to attack the origins of the machines. We will feel free to attack the staging areas in Poland or in Moldova or in other nations of Europe for these attacks on Russia. And we will respond in kind. We will respond in this way, even if it means going to France to respond, or going to the United Kingdom to respond, or even going to the United States to respond. We are not playing games. We know, whether you push the buttons or not, that you are fighting us in Ukraine, and that you are enabling attacks on Russia proper. We're not going to allow that to happen. We're not going to allow you to get away with that. We're going to reply in kind. We are going to reply with attacks on your home grounds, just as you are attacking ours. This is a reciprocity situation. You can't get away with attacking our home grounds and expect us not to retaliate against your home grounds. Quoting again from the article, when the U.S. should be exercising its diplomatic power, it is instead entrenching itself deeper into a war Kiev is unlikely to win, unquote. The Koch brothers funded organization added. That's Defense Priorities, a Washington, D.C. based foreign policy think tank funded by the Koch brothers, or actually by the Koch brothers funded organization. They're calling for diplomacy. They're saying we should avoid escalation by attacking Russia directly. Putin is saying that as well. But our people don't seem inclined to believe him, to accept him at his word. But I think we have to take Putin's threats very, very seriously at this point and think about what we would do in a similar situation if people based in Mexico started to attack us, or people based in Canada started to attack us. Would we care whether those people were Canadian soldiers or whether they were Russian soldiers who were just visiting? Would we care if they were Mexican soldiers or Chinese soldiers who were just visiting? No. I don't think we would tolerate that kind of activity for a New York second if it was occurring on our soil. But now we complain when the Russians want to do the same thing, want to have the same freedom that we have to commit what's essentially self-defense. So what is Biden doing? He is risking our security. He's been doing it for ages now. This is only the last and most grievous thing that he's done to risk our security. So that's where we are. We are on the brink. Not much of the public knows we're on the brink because the mass media have been ignoring that we were getting closer and closer to the brink. And today, they don't seem to be talking about the risks we are taking. We must protest. We must stop this administration from continuing to take grave risks of our lives for the sake of defending the regime in Ukraine right now. What is that regime to us? We know in the past it's been a harbor for neo-Nazis. We know it's not a democracy. We know it's a dictatorship right now. We know it's said to be the most corrupt place in Europe. And still, we just gave them $61 billion to continue to prosecute the war. That's what we did. And among the weapons we gave them were weapons that they can use to drag us into nuclear war. This was a foreign policy act of monumental stupidity on the part of Joe Biden. And the follow-up today, giving President Zelensky carte blanche to use these weapons. Now, some will say it is not carte blanche because Biden has said they only have permission to strike in the Kharkiv region. They don't have permission to go further. But the Ukrainians are desperate. They want us to get into the war. So why wouldn't they go beyond what Joe Biden thinks is the limited scope of their attack? Bonnie is going to give me I guess she's not going to give me anything right now. I'm not sure what I was thinking. I was so conflicted by the threats. What I'm groping for is a way to say to the American people who might perhaps view this, a way to say to them, this foreign policy and its implementation by the Biden administration is putting your lives at risk. There are many reasons to think, and I do think, that Donald Trump is unacceptable as a president of the United States. I thought so long before this conviction. I thought so while he was president, and I've thought that since he was no longer president. I've thought that for a very long time. But that doesn't mean I have to accept the nonsense of a two-party system, suggesting that I must vote for somebody who's putting my life and the life of my family and friends at risk, as well as your lives and everybody listening to me tonight. That is what Joe Biden is doing. And it is just as or more unacceptable that he become president again as it is that Trump become president again. Both are decision makers that do not care about us and that will risk our lives for their own political gain in a New York second. We need third-party candidates who we know care about whether we live or die and who will do all that is necessary to keep us safe. So enough with Trump and enough with Biden. Somehow we have to find a way to bring other people to the fore between now and the election, to get them on the ballot, and to vote for the best candidate among them as we see it. Because we can't be left any longer with this Trump versus Biden choice. We must get rid of it. I've said that before, of course, and I am saying it again now. It is just unacceptable that we allow this choice to dominate our politics. In this episode, as we get deeper in 2024, it becomes increasingly clear that politics as usual is completely unacceptable. The risks to our lives posed by both major parties and their candidates are too great for us to tolerate. We must bring change at the ballot box. We must see the change start to happen long before voting day. We must see the mobilization occur. We must create it in the coming months so we kick them both to the curb. On that note, I'm going to consider your comments. Robert says, I don't think we can trust most politicians at all levels of government. Yes, that's why we have the Dump the Corruption movement, because we have to replace them all with new ones who know that we replace them because of their corruption, and so who will not dare to be corrupt. And Robert says, I don't know if Russia's stupid enough to use nuclear weapons, as that would kill billions of people. Here's the calculus for Russia, Robert. It's a very simple calculus. The Ukrainians began to attack the long-distance radars, of Russia. Those have nothing to do with Ukraine. They began to hit those because they give the Russians early warning of intercontinental attacks from the south. Taking out radars like that represents an existential threat to Russia. What is Russia supposed to do if it doesn't have an early warning system that is working? I'll tell you what they're supposed to do. What they would do in that instance is they would set all their missiles tipped with nuclear weapons. They would set them up for automatic fire if explosions start occurring around them. They would set them up for automatic retaliation that could not be stopped. They would set them up on hair triggers, because they would have to assume at the slightest bit of evidence that they were under attack and that they had to try to hit back before their capability was knocked out. So they would head back with those 6,000 warheads and the hypersonic missiles. And they would try to knock us out before we could knock them out. that is what they would do. It's not a question of Russia being stupid enough. It's a question of whether they're calculated enough and responsible enough to refrain from retaliating for long enough to find out whether a supposed attack is not really an attack. We should not be putting them in that kind of situation because there will be a mistake, there will be accidents, and we'll have a nuclear war where no one's intention is to have such a war. It's not a question if they're stupid enough. It's a question if they're responsible enough and sane enough not to attack in the face of a hair trigger type of event. And April says, hashtag dump the corruption to stop the nuclear winter. Kay says, hi, Joe and all. Hi, Kay. John B. says the American people are a product of corrupt media, a product of unbridled corporatism fueled by a corrupted political structure, uncontrolled climate, 52 degrees Celsius in India, and wars make change imperative. Yes, they do. They make change imperative. We must have change. Radical change at the ballot box this November. Nobody who takes big money should be elected again. And Michelle de Villiers, hi, Michelle. Great to see you here. The efforts of the Democratic Party to keep third parties off the ballot are reprehensible at best and completely undemocratic. Yes, they are. Completely undemocratic. That's why we, when people say that Trump is going to end our democracy, I have no doubt that he will try to end it. But I also have no doubt that Joe Biden is in the process of ending it right now. He has forced us to have the choice of himself versus Biden because he and those who follow him have done their best to make him unchallengeable in the Democratic Party primaries. They did their best to end democracy inside of the Democratic Party. And we have to think that they're all for ending democracy in the larger political system also. Won't they try their best to rig the election against Trump in 2024? And won't they try to keep on rigging going forward because rigging has worked so well for them in 2024? We need to punish them for their undemocratic behavior and for the risk they have subjected us to. And the only way that happens is if we vote against them in 2024 and vote against Donald Trump because he is equally motivated to destroy democracy. And no doubt he will. And April asks, Joe, did Fascist Book ever clarify how you supposedly violated community standards? No, they said it would probably be before sometime after this weekend that I would hear back from them. So no, they haven't clarified anything. John B. said the U.S. is selfish cavalier approach to existential issues has set the entire world on a course to nuclear annihilation. Not just in Ukraine. The most immediate threat right now is in Ukraine because of the decision of Joe Biden. But there are big risks as well in the Israelis' war against the Gazans. Big risks. Big risks. The capability of Iran to have nuclear weapons is, after all, only a matter of weeks if they want those weapons. And they've already proven that they're not even their latest hypersonic weapons, but some of their least impressive hypersonic weapons have gotten through the Iron Dome defenses of Israel, not just the Iron Dome, but the combined Iron Dome and allied defenses of Israel as the war has gone on. There's no doubt that if the Iranians want to, they can break through the Israeli defenses again. This time they can level cities. This time they can be directed at settlements in the West Bank. This time they can devastate Israel. And they may just want to do that. And Michelle says the Democrats don't want to do anything but suck time, energy, and money from their members without accountability. Yes, John. Or I should say yes, Michelle. That is absolutely correct. John B. says both parties have rigged democracy against the people, not only of the U.S., but the entire world. Yes, John B. That is also true. Evelina says, just tuning in. Hi. Well, Evelina, thank you for coming. We are nearly done here. D will be starting at 9 o'clock, and I will be going over there very shortly. We've reached a point in this stream where we've just been talking together. In a few minutes, I will leave to join her. What this stream has been about, the topic of it was escalating risks are grounds for firing. The Biden administration has subjected us to escalating risks. Oh, by the way, please share, like, and subscribe. I keep forgetting to remind people, and nobody likes, and that affects the algorithm. That's not good. So, the Biden administration has subjected us to escalating risks and is continuing to subject us to the escalating risk of giving the Russians good reason to attack us on our home grounds. If that happens, this is likely to escalate very rapidly to a world war, and probably very, very much to a nuclear war, as well. And Michelle de Villiers says, I've checked out the Modern Money Authority. It's terrific. Thank you, Michelle. And what is the purpose of the Modern Money Authority, Michelle? I guess I can fill that in without waiting for anybody to do it. The purpose is is to bring modern money theory to the masses, because it's so important. To introduce the general public to truth in economics, says Michelle. Nicely done, Michelle. John B. says the U.S. has got to sober up from years of power drunkenness. I know. What's the equivalent of cold water being poured on the hegemon? Okay, it is now 9:01, and I'm pretty much done here. So I'm going to say good night. I may see you tomorrow night. I'll certainly see you on Tuesday when I'll be back with another interrelations show. So good night for tonight. And I recommend that you all follow me over to Around the World with Dee and Friends. I will be there in a couple of minutes. Michelle says, good night, Joe. Great show. Thank you, Michelle. I do appreciate it. I'm going to end the stream now.